Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, two of which pertain to the quote-unquote mandate. It's always about the mandate after the presidential election. What is the president's mandate? We're going to be dispelling some of the facts. We're going to be talking about what other people are saying about it, of course, and we're going to have a final article talking about some changes coming to the House that may actually make the House Speaker's job a little bit easier. And, of course, we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. But that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump into our daily debate. So, in the past, has any president actually had a presidential mandate? Has the vote been so over the top? It has been so landslide-like, probably Nixon, you're thinking, maybe close to Reagan, that their message, their agenda is so endorsed by the American people that they have an unlimited mandate to do as they see, but also what they promised. I want to know, is there anyone else who, it didn't have to be a landslide, but you saw those sentiments? Because I don't necessarily think I ever see a mandate, but hey, we'll get into that. We're going to jump into our first article before I start doing all my bloviating, all right? So, the first one comes from Raw Story. Headline reads, Trump victory was slim and not historic mandate, Republicans claim. Analysis. Now, that doesn't mean, and what I think they miss here is, oh, it was slim, so it's not a historic mandate. No one ever wants to give up the fact that nobody has a mandate when they are elected president because, and let's be clear, when I say they don't have a mandate, it's not as though they were not voted in for a reason. It's not as though certain policies did not resonate with certain people. But that does not mean that they have a blank check mandate that encompasses anything that goes along with said policy. And whether or not it's slim has nothing to do with it. And like I was saying, Raw Story and other pundits don't want to admit that there isn't a mandate because then if somebody they like gets in, they want the mandate to be a thing. And why does a mandate not exist? Why is it just a false idea that is planted every single time a president comes to power? One, because the president wants to have a mandate. So they go out and make speeches and use rhetoric such as, the American people put me here to do this. This is my mandate from them, so on and so forth. And I'm going to be honest, we are not a country of manifest destiny. We are not a country of huge world-changing ideas that require a true mandate given to you by something higher and something more powerful. Now, even then, I think you could make very strong arguments against the mandate idea. But the point I'm getting at is an election is not just a process of voting for your ideas, but also of voting against others, especially in the world we live in nowadays. So you could maybe make arguments in the past when everybody was a policy head, which, let's be clear, no American citizen has, or at least in no period during American history, has every citizen been a policy head, and therefore cares so much about the policies of every single individual. Even then, it was not really a mandate because during those times, there were people voting against other people's policies. There were people voting on vibes. And as we move into this modern era of politics, where, let's be clear, a lot of people still do vote for some policies, but especially during this election and the last one, a lot of it was voting against Trump in 2020, against Joe Biden and his legacy in 2024, and voting for in 2020, voting for normality, not necessarily policies, but normality. It was even called the normality election. The return to normality was the entire talking point of Biden's time running for office. And that doesn't mean that he didn't propose legislation or he didn't propose different ideas of how we could fix the economy. I'm not trying to say that policy plays no role whatsoever. There are the policy heads out there. There are going to be I say I'm a policy head. I'm not as much as a policy head as some people at think tanks are. Think tank people are definitely going to be absolute policy heads, and they're probably going to vote on policy a lot of the time because they have a coherent worldview, or at least they have specific views about certain issues on how to properly address them. Now, let's actually jump into what the Raw Story article is saying, because Raw Story doesn't like Donald Trump, so of course they're going to try to bash the mandate. But they can provide a nice little antithesis to what I would say on certain points about whether the mandate exists or not, but we'll jump into that. So let's go into our third paragraph here. Quote, "The American people have spoken and given us a mandate. We will be prepared to deliver on day one. With Republicans in control, we will secure the border, grow our economy, restore American energy dominance, and end the radical woke agenda. America's best days are ahead of us," he claimed, coming directly from Mr. Trump himself. Quote, this is now the author of the article speaking. "The results are clear. Donald Trump won the White House, and Republicans are projected to have a majority in the House and the Senate. But any claim to a mandate or a historic election is false," says critics. Quote, "Yes, Trump won, but it is not a mandate," declared former Undersecretary of State Richard Stingel, a former managing editor of Time magazine. Quote, "His very slim popular vote margin seems outsized only in comparison to the fact that ours seldom win the popular vote. He got fewer votes than last time. He won because of millions of folks who chose not to vote. Hardly a mandate," end quote. And they get at what I was talking about before about this world, this U.S. situation of politics is much more complicated than just how many people voted for you, how many people didn't vote for you, how many people decided not to go vote at all, how many people voted against you, how many people voted for a third-party candidate to ensure they wouldn't have to put your name down, and how many people voted for you because they were voting against the other woman in this case. So when we have this question of a mandate, it's always extremely useful. Even the House Speaker, more recently, Mike Johnson, came out and said, hey, we have a mandate here. One, it's useful because you want to appear as though you have the ability, the love and support of the American people when fulfilling your own personal goals or the goals of your constituents or the goals of your party. So you want to sound highfalutin and say, this is a mandate that we were given from the people. This is not just our party. This is the rest of America. They put us here to do it. By that math, the House is very slim, so I don't know if you can make that argument. The Senate, you could say that, well, there's more mandate-ish energy there, so to speak. But even then, it is a slim majority, not a long majority. And remember, all of these races are individual battles. People in Nevada aren't, then again, I was about to say that people in Nevada aren't necessarily thinking about the national stage of politics, but I could actually see a counter argument there where this world we live in, the United States that we live in, is actually much more understanding of the national level of politics, and they see it as more of a national game than they do a local game. So maybe a lot of people do actually think out the fact that they want to have a Republican Senate backing Donald Trump, or they want a split Senate so it would actually be hard for Donald Trump to do things. That's why you have split ticket voters. People do have a conception of the larger scale. But I would also say that it still is, each race is still a microcosm that requires the voter to test their assumptions with each person. And just because they vote for, because of split-taking voting, we have great examples of just because they vote for Donald Trump doesn't necessarily mean that in the next microcosm down, the next race down, they're going to vote for straight R. So I think that it is childish. Childish is a strong word. It is political gamesmanship to claim that you simply have a mandate because you got into office. And I think it is childish to claim that, oh, it's only a mandate if it's a big win. No, there is no such thing as the political mandate. At least that is so easily manifest as to tell you exactly what you can do. What are Mike Johnson and the future majority leader of the Senate, Mr. Thune, what are he and Trump and Johnson going to take away from this? What mandate do they get specifically? Like I said, there are a few ones that you could make that argument because exit polls also tell us what people want, which is mass deportation, or at least a majority of Trump voters were aware of his mass deportation policies. And you could make that argument that that could be some form of mandate. But you know why you can make that argument? That is only because we have a breakdown of the issues that people cared about or knew about while voting for that person and did not stop them from voting. Or we have other breakdowns that tell people that's why they voted for him. In that case, that is when you have some sort of policy mandate, some sort of driven policy change that you can actually implement and probably should implement and have been put in office to implement. But simply because you won does not mean you have a mandate for your entire agenda. Presidencies and House elections and Senate elections that end in one party winning all three very often overread their mandate. They try to do too much. And even on the deportation one, with a lot of people knowing what Donald Trump and most of the other Republicans wanted him to do, I think they got to move slow. I think they got to be very careful, because I do understand that a lot of people are aware of his policy, but does that mean they truly understand what mass deportations would look like? Do they understand the hours upon hours of footage of people being torn away from one another, people crying? And let's be clear, whether or not they're here illegally and they deserve to be taken out of this country, if that's your perspective on it, great, cool. But you cannot forget the massive, massive piece of this, which is you have to see it. The media is not going to let that go by without you observing it, without showing it to everybody and pulling at the heartstrings and telling the stories of these immigrants as they're ripped away from their families, as they're left to leave this nation crying. And even if you are the most stone cold person ever and you 100% agree that they should be gone, that emotional imagery is probably going to hit you somewhere. And even if it doesn't hit you somewhere, it's going to hit people around you somewhere. And those questions are going to be raised. So Donald Trump needs to be very careful moving forward with that one specifically, because I think that is the one thing out of all of it that he has the most evidence that he has a mandate for. But he also needs to understand that a lot of people don't understand what mass deportations actually look like. But hey, I've been arguing about mandates for quite some time, and I didn't actually read a separate section from this article. So we're going to go down to this bottom part. Quote, currently, according to the Cook Political Reports vote tracker, Donald Trump is beating Kamala Harris by 3.2 million votes, or 2.7%. Those numbers will change, of course, but the margin will likely stay about the same, if not narrow. When the votes are all counted, the Washington Post's Philip Bump notes, quote, Trump will likely end up with the narrowest margin of victory since 2000, and it's probably in large part because of a lot of 2020 Joe Biden voters staying home, end quote. And this is the perfect point. Joe Biden voters who went out there for Joe Biden or against Donald Trump last time, they were not compelled enough by the democracy is going to end argument. They weren't compelled enough by anything Kamala had brought to the table. They didn't fear Donald Trump enough to truly go out and vote against him, but they didn't see anything that inspired them on the other side of the aisle that told them, yes, I'm going to go out and vote for the Democratic candidate. And does that make a mandate? Does that actually tell you that Trump's policies are better? Because, well, he won, obviously, but why did he win? Because people didn't get out and vote. They didn't go out and vote for him or Kamala Harris at all. No, that doesn't tell you anything. That's why this mandate business is a way to project that you are in the right as you start to implement your policies. It is a way to show the American people that, hey, well, this is what we're doing. This is why it's okay to do so. And while I understand the political prowess of doing it, the political gamesmanship that is being had, I think that we all have to step back and really call people out when they say, well, he has a mandate. What is his blank check mandate on any of these policies? Oh, fix the economy. Yeah, no, maybe you have a mandate on that, but you do not have a mandate on any particular policy that comes out of your administration, because guess what? You never proposed a way to fix the economy. And let's be clear, he did. But I'm saying if you win on just, I will fix the economy, you have a mandate to fix the economy, but that doesn't mean any of your policies you inherently have a mandate to, okay? Especially, that's another great point, especially in this age of political vagaries. Yeah, it's hard to have an actual mandate. And like I said, deportation can be a okay example of it because of the fact that we have so much polling telling us that people were aware of it, people were okay with it. And you could say there's a mandate on that, but that does not give you an overall mandate to your entire platform. People vote for many different reasons, okay? I know plenty of people that voted for Trump for economic reasons. I know plenty of people who voted against him for his pro-life policies. I know plenty of people that voted for him because of the illegal immigration. I know plenty of people who switched sides because of the illegal immigration. I know people that were afraid of crime in their local neighborhoods that voted for him. So there are a multitude of reasons, and that does not give you a blank check for every single part of your mandate. You have to look at your base. You have to do some analysis. You have to do some breakdown of what most of the people cared about, and then you can say you have a mandate for this one thing. But even then, I think a mandate is a stretch, and I think we need to be careful when using that word because very often it gets written like a blank check when it's only ever really intended to be used as a tool to get what policy makers want. All right, so let's jump into our second article that also talks about mandates. And this one comes from the National Review. It's actually a little bit critical of Trump. And the headline reads, Trump doesn't have a mandate for chaos. So now we've had one side saying, hey, he doesn't have a mandate at all. Now the other side is saying, well, some sort of mandate does exist. It's kind of like a middle of the ground position that I've had where like you could say that this maybe is a mandate here, but even then I think it's more like it should be a priority than it is a mandate. But then they're coming in saying, well, he has a mandate somewhere, but it is not to have a chaotic second and last term. So I thought this was funny coming from National Review. They're going to, do their thing. They're going to come out and be pro-Trump on some things, anti-Trump on other things, traditional conservative on some things, a little bit new Republican, new right on other things, and yet they cannot hold back their contempt for Mr. Matt Gaetz and some of the picks that Donald Trump is making at this point. Quote, maybe the most hated man in Congress, a figure who is uniquely saddled with ethical scandals himself. Gaetz is just the latest wrecking ball in the human form to get Trump's nod for a cabinet post. Tulsi Gabbard, with her naive, credulous, but even the most outlandish anti-American narrative spread by Americans' enemies, is another. RFK Jr. may be next. When it comes to saving Trump from his worst instincts, the GOP has only so much bandwidth. Republicans have to pick their battles. End quote. Okay. Let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question. Attorney General, Trump has seen the DOJ weaponized against him, and sometimes rightfully so. In the documents case, that seemed like an absolute lockup banger. And then in other cases where it seems a little bit outlandish, where he's seen AGs of certain states come after him. So he wants a sycophantic, trustworthy person there in the AG slot. Also, because of some of his practices during his own term, there was reporting that he had multiple meetings about how to get the DOJ in line with his vision. What does Trump not like when it comes to the national security apparatus? The fact that Obama used it to spy on him, that some of his supporters and MAGA supporters have been targeted and spied on, that many Catholics have been spied on, though I don't really think he cares about Catholics. He probably cares about the fact that a lot of Catholics support him nowadays. So why would he put Tulsi Gabbard there? Not only because she is not hawkish, and I think her foreign policy has something to do with it, but honestly, I think it's the fact that he trusts her to keep them in line because she has some understanding of what the military side of operations look like, and she is a person that he actually trusts. I don't necessarily think there's an argument along those lines for RFK Jr. I think RFK Jr.'s really was just pony trading in order to get RFK to back Donald Trump on the campaign trail. But those two specifically, they are in place because, one, they're more aligned with Trump in his rhetoric, doesn't mean his actual policies, but in his rhetoric on how he goes about talking about anti-war, anti-big establishment, anti-big government, and he finds them very, very trustworthy. And they are the two positions where he really wants to have a trustworthy person. Now, let's be clear, there are other examples. I think Marco Rubio is a trustworthy person, and I think Donald Trump doesn't necessarily trust him the most because he is a neocon, so to speak, but also he's putting them into a position where he kind of probably had to acquiesce in order to keep the MAGA base, the operatives that are not necessarily Trumpian but are still Republican, within his circles happy. But he brings in the Matt Gaetz for the critical position, no matter how crazy he is, in order to basically be lockstep with Donald Trump, and Tulsi Gabbard in order to play a little bit of a hedge against some of the worst fear-mongering and hawkish instincts of the people around him, but also because he thinks that she is closer to him on ideology or belief system, at least the way he spoke about it, and he can trust her in order to make sure that the intelligence that he's getting is not flawed. I mean, remember, he was basically, I don't want to say duped, because he is the president, so he should have found a way to actually get the information he wanted. But he was told essentially that they had pulled out of multiple military locations when that wasn't inherently true, when they were trying to downsize their presence in many different areas across the Middle East, and some generals decided, no, we're actually going to keep some things in. Then again, the generals are different than a DNI. I mean, because the DNI basically worries about the coordination between the different intelligence agencies, but you can also make sure that you're getting relevant intelligence from that person. They're getting reports from all the different intelligence agencies, and if Tulsi Gabbard goes in and asks and say, hey, I need a ground count, I need some drone surveillance footage, I need an idea of what it looks like here in this area, she's going to try to present it honestly to him. She's not going to necessarily play the party line, the Washington hawkish party line, in order to get information to Trump. Then again, she could be lied to as well. She's not perfect, but in some ideal world, she has some understanding of how the game is played, and she's able to bring the most relevant information to Trump and stay in line with him. So they're kind of mitigating factors to some of the other picks that the National Review would be praising, whether it be, I believe Waltz is one that they would probably praise. Marco Rubio would be one that they praise, the hardline foreign policy sort of guys. Then again, they have made certain swings in areas around Ukraine, but not necessarily. So let's actually go to the problems directly with Gaetz. Quote, if only to uncover the many skeletons allegedly lurking in Gaetz's closet now. Thus, inculcating him, and importantly the Senate Republicans who might confirm him against the scandal that would erupt when that information became public on its own, the GOP should put screws in the Florida congressman. If he survives the grilling, he'll emerge stronger for it. If he doesn't, he wasn't cut out to serve as America's top cop in the first place. And here's the part that I actually love. It's literally the next paragraph. Quote, mandates are subjective things, and Trump isn't the only figure in Washington who owes his or her position to the trust of the voters. The Senate's 100 members do too. And to survey how the Senate GOP leadership election shook out, that body doesn't seem to be in the mood to move fast and break things, end quote. That one, I like the overall point, which is you're not just going to be able to convince them to immediately go recess appointments in order to get people with a less than perfect record through. And I say less than perfect record because a lot of things are allegations at this point, but you still don't want those allegations on your record. And also, they don't necessarily want to have confirming him on their record. The senators don't, at least, as well. And I think the first point is the most important point in that paragraph. If Trump has a mandate, so if we're to buy into mandates, if Trump has a mandate, then all these other senators also have mandates. It's to best represent their people in their districts. And are they really best represented by an AG like Matt Gaetz? So that's the beautiful thing about mandates. It's not just if you're going to have a mandate, and because they're subjective things, if you're going to have a mandate, it can't just apply to Donald Trump and his vision for things. It's not just only Donald Trump wins. Okay, this is whether or not you like it. This is not an America that is owned only by Donald Trump. The Republican Party is practically lock, stock, barrel for Donald Trump. But that doesn't mean that all of them are going to fall in line with Donald Trump. That doesn't mean that right now they have to actually go in and say, oh, only Donald Trump wins. Guess what? They can fall in line for their people, not for Donald Trump. And if he has a mandate that is given to him by his voters, then they all have individual mandates given to them by their voters. That's the thing with mandates. It can't just be uniform across the entire board for one person's agenda and one person's agenda only, even if they have a high coattails. Because guess what? There are other people voting for other reasons. There are people doing the split ticket voting like I was talking about before, like I've talked about probably every single episode this week, because it is a big deal. There are plenty of people who swap back and forth. There are plenty of moderates who don't necessarily believe in the overall vision of Donald Trump, but maybe believe in the vision of someone like a Cormick. Or maybe there are plenty of people who don't agree with a Kamala Harris, but they do agree with a Gallego because he came to the center in Arizona. So the point being, either you have mandates and everybody got one, and it's going to end up hurting you more than you expect because their mandate might not be the same as your mandate, or you have a mandate that overrides everybody else's mandate, or you have no mandate. And I think when Trump goes for the I have a mandate over everybody else, he is going for a mandate of chaos. And I think it's funny, some of these picks. Don't get me wrong. I don't like Gaetz at all. I'm not defending his pick to be in the place he's in. I think that he is a social media hungry, fame hungry sort of person, sort of man, and that he will probably burn out by the time the Donald Trump movement is over. I do like Tulsi. I've always enjoyed Tulsi. I think that her brand of independence is not far off from a lot of people nowadays, honestly. Then again, there are certain policies I would agree with on both sides of her agenda as she's flipped from Democrat to Republican. So that's really not the point. I'm not trying to say either of them are good or bad picks. What I'm trying to point out is there are legitimate reasons that they were picked over other people. They are hedges against the deep state. They are people that are more loyal to Donald Trump, and they are also hedges against the old ideology of the Republican Party that led the Republican Party to a place where it could be taken over by Donald Trump. And whether you like it or not, that shows weakness. And I think Donald Trump recognized that. I think he recognizes the fact that he could come in and take over the entire party showed how weak they were and how many opportunities they were missing. He realized that he's the marketing genius, and he brought something to the table nobody else could. And that's why he uses the leverage the way he does to get these sort of picks in. All right, so let's jump to our final article that is more procedural, and it comes from CBS News. House GOP reaches deal to make it harder to oust Speaker. Can I just say, finally, we got here, guys. Okay, no longer is it just one person that can oust a speaker. And some of you may be saying, well, hey, that's a really democratic process. I mean, all it takes is the dissent of one person. No, it is idiotic, okay? It's not like the threshold is actually that high nowadays. It's not like it's back to half of the conference or anything like that. It is actually just 9. Last time I checked, going through this article, guess what? All you need are 9 people in order to actually dissent. Quote, the House Freedom Caucus agreed to increase the threshold to 9 members. In exchange for the increase, the Main Street Caucus would drop proposed rule changes that sought to punish those who defied the majority of the party. And that sounds pretty moderate to me. Guess what? We're going to raise the limit to 9. So basically, if the entire House Freedom Caucus, or even just part of it, decided, you know what, we don't like what Mike Johnson's doing, and they got really unified on it, then yeah, they could still try to oust the speaker. And they're getting a little bit of extra love out of it, saying, hey, just because we don't stick with you guys, that doesn't mean we deserve to be punished. I think this is the old-fashioned deal-making that was happening in the Congress beforehand. Now, I understand. A lot of people don't like that old-fashioned deal-making. They want the hard-line, principled stances. Oh, you have a problem with Mike Johnson. He is not doing exactly what falls within the purview of the agenda that we agreed upon as a party. Then he needs to be ousted. I get all of those sentiments. I really do. I also think you're wrong, and I think you're crazy. I think that when you are in that body, everybody brings their principles, everybody brings their worldview to the table, everybody brings the needs and concerns of every single one of their constituents. But guess what? It is not in the best value, it is not the best interest of your constituents in order to hold a principled stance and give up any potential leverage in order to benefit them. But it's also, because guess what, when you're in that body, you're representing your people there, but you're also trying to make sure that the United States continues to function. You're representing yourself, but you also have to understand other people are representing their constituencies, and you have to fight for all of America. You have to fight for your part of America first, and you have to fight for all of America to make sure that is successful. And guess what? You being a absolute blowhard, you being someone who stands there and is not willing to go along. Not saying that you have to agree with everything. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be smaller bills in order to make this harder to have back and forth negotiations where you give up $1,000 in military spending here and get an extra part on the military base here. I'm not trying to disagree. I think we should break up a lot of these spending bills, and then it makes the conversations in the back and forth a lot more robust rather than just horse trading over large line items because there are thousands of them there in the bill. But you have to be willing to play ball in order to benefit your own people, bring things back to them, but also ensure that the rest of the American people are going to come out better for this. And guess what? If you have a principled stance and you want to die on that hill, fair enough. I understand. I'm not trying to pretend as though that is not something that people can do, that people shouldn't do. Okay, but you cannot come and whine to me when you say, why aren't we getting things done? Why am I not being heard? Why are people ignoring me? Why am I able to not get what I want? Why am I being the one that is ostracized when you do that? And then try to use that power, use the fact that you're being a blowhard about things in order to oust the speaker. I'm not saying anybody has done that. I'm not saying anybody has done that whatsoever. But my point being that this is more in line with this new rule, is more in line with how I would want a house to operate. You can't just be that one blowhard and derail everything. You have to play ball a little bit. And then you can make your stand strategically. You can make sure that you're getting the leverage that you need in order to make sure your constituents are happy. And also the government keeps functioning for and by the people. But hey, maybe I'm a little bit too much of an institutionalist on that one. Fair enough. So let's jump to our final article. It is indeed our daily delight, and it comes from Animals Around the Globe. Meet Fig, the adorable cat who will always be kitten-sized. Now, he is a dwarf kitten. He's adorable. I understand that being a dwarf kitten comes with some medical complications for sure, but his parents are absolutely loving. They say they're going to stick with him throughout the entire thing. They're going to pay the medical bills that are going to come along with it. So if you want to see any videos or photos of this cute guy, see him interacting with the family members, it's absolutely adorable. I promise you it will be worth your time. Also, if you want to check out the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Casts, and Podvine, the links are in the description below the like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find all of the articles from today and the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. And on top of that, if you want international news, you can come back to this RSS feed, this YouTube channel on Tuesday at 12 p.m. And guess what? At noon, you're going to have 6 minutes of international news. Real quick, one story from each continent that is populated except for Antarctica. Because technically, Antarctica is populated, but not really. Not really. There's not much going on in Antarctica to report besides maybe the finding of a new bacteria in a core sample or something to that effect. So, with that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.